Welcome to Stepping Out with Sheriff Mike Chapman.
Hi, Loudoun County Sheriff Mike Chapman here. Today we're introducing a new podcast series called Stepping Out. As you may know, we already have a podcast series entitled Get to Know Your LCSO, where we talk about what the Loudoun County Sheriff's Office does to work with the community to keep you safe. This series is going to focus not only on issues that pertain to us locally, but also issues that may pertain to us regionally, nationally, and even globally. Today, I'm very happy and honored to have our first guest here, Derek Maltz. So I've known Derek for, probably almost 40 years, 35, 40 years, from our time in the DEA together. He's got an interesting life story, and we're looking forward to getting to know him a little bit better here. He is, as you may know, he was the acting administrator for DEA for several months there, for about 4 months, and has a long historic career with DEA, but has an interesting life as well with athletics, with what he's done. I guess you went to Syracuse University there, and you played lacrosse there, and you had kids that played lacrosse at Maryland. So lots to unpack here. But let's start out here, Derek. I'd like to find out a little bit about your background, what brought you to DEA, and I know. For example, I know your dad had a reputation for being just a working machine up there in New York and was an associate SAC, I guess, up there in New York. So tell us a bit about your background, why you got involved in DEA, and what motivated you to do that, and just a little bit about your life story here. So go ahead, take it away.
So first of all, thank you, Sheriff. I live in this county, and I know I feel very safe. You guys have professionalized law enforcement to a whole new level, so thank you for that. And yes, we've known each other a long time, but I was a young kid, went to Syracuse University, had no idea what I wanted to do. My father was a DEA executive, 30 years in the DEA, and kind of forced me into this field. Actually, I had no desire to be in law enforcement, but I'm very thankful.
Wow.
I worked 28 years in DEA. I started out in New York. I worked my way up the ladder. Eventually, I became the special agent in charge of DEA Special Operations Division out here in Chantilly, Virginia. When I got there were 9 agencies. When I left, there were 30. But one of the things I want you to know and people to know is that my brother died in Afghanistan in Operation Enduring Freedom. So that was 2 years before I took over the Special Operations Division. So he died fighting for this country and in the U.S. Air Force Pararescue Unit. But the point I'm trying to make is that when I got to the Special Operations Division, there were 9 agencies. When I left, there were 30. Because it's all about bringing together the great men and women that are fighting to serve this country, to keep people safe. So, I worked there for 10 years. I retired. I went to work for this company, Penlink, which is a well-known law enforcement solutions company, providing solutions to law enforcement. And then I was called in day one of the Trump administration to help out. I was actually offered the job, Associate Deputy Attorney General, but then they detailed me over to be acting DEA administrator, which I actually enjoyed because my father and I had about 60 years of DEA time.
Hey, so let's get back to your brother here. You bring up a good point here. We appreciate the service and sacrifice, but you have the Maltz Challenge. Can you tell us what the Maltz Challenge is all about? Yeah,
the Maltz Challenge started, about 20 years ago, and it was just a challenge, a CrossFit challenge, because obviously the PJs very well fit, and they really enjoyed doing CrossFit, which I can't do myself, and certainly not at this age. But every year they would have this annual event, and it would be offered around the world, and the DEA would bring in, folks from, all over the world, and they'd nominate other DOD families, people who have died in the line of duty, to kind of honor them and recognize their service.
Well, appreciate you doing that. And now I got a question for you, because I heard this story, I think, from you many years ago, that when your dad was a special agent with DEA up in New York, that you were like a kid in a car, and
absolutely,
and that you had he actually had you help with the surveillance.
Yeah, call sign was 701 and a half. He was 701 as the boss. And one Saturday night, he had myself and a friend of mine to go out on surveillance. He was looking for a heroin fugitive. Long story short, really nothing going on, sitting in the back of a car at a Burger King for hours. And then finally, the female, who he thought was like a girlfriend, gets home, gets the kids, they go to the movie theater, and then we follow to Far Rockaway. And it was really interesting when I look back, because he sent me and my friend, 13 years old, into a very dangerous area, Far Rockaway, New York, into a high-rise, to follow her into the building and try to see if we can locate the apartment, which we did. And we came out, and he let me talk on the radio. I said, 701 in all units, we put her in apartment 11D. So actually, I started at 13. That's true.
Wow. Well, that's pretty crazy. Yeah. So so you started your career way earlier than when you went to college there. So so now you were in New York for most of your career, right?
Right. That's when we met.
Yeah. So so you can go in that story a little bit, and I'll touch on it just a little bit here. I remember when I was assigned to Karachi, Pakistan, we were working a heroin case, and we had actually two informants that were involved in that. One had earlier gotten me 5 kilos for delivery into the U.S. We actually brought it to Miami, and we brought it to Miami to do this delivery, and it actually worked out well because we got a couple of people from the mob. We had Sal Gambino, we had Paul Cano, there was another guy that came down to pick this stuff up. I mean, so it was a really pretty good case. Okay, so we were able to arrest them as they were getting into the cab, getting ready to go back to the airport. So it was a really good case, and that kind of spawned off another case in which we were able to get 20 kilos of heroin, and it's like 90% pure heroin. And so I remember reaching out, and there was we had a couple people in our office there were working different angles, and you were out of New York, and I was working mostly with the guys in Miami, but we got this 20 kilos of heroin, and it kind of came down to like, how are we going to divide this up, and who's it going to go to, and all that. So I know a lot of this was supposed to go to New York, and so for the first time probably ever, you came out to Karachi, Pakistan, and met with me, and you can take it from there.
Yeah, I mean, that was an interesting trip because I was afraid to stay overnight. If you remember, I came in and out, and we flew back together on the Air France flight, and we left the Karachi airport with the 20 kilograms. Everyone in the airport knew who we were and what we were doing.
Right.
That was interesting.
Yeah.
And then we got back to New York, and we used your informant, and we made the phone calls back to the kingpin, Salik John, over there in Northwest Frontier province of Pakistan, to actually get the customers that were all over the New York area. And we also were lucky, so we wound up getting Louis Solano and Gaetano Di Girolamo, which were like old school, like Purple Gang members in the old days in New York. So yeah, we had a lot of fun on those deliveries, and it was an awesome opportunity for me to really see that part of the world.
I remember a lot of contentiousness because there were a lot of people that wanted to take ownership or to facilitate the deliveries of some of that heroin. And I just remember a big meeting that we had. We had the folks, so we had the associate SAC and the SAC from, associate SAC from Miami up, Lionel Stewart at the time. He came up, and we had some other folks there. We were sitting at this round table. And I just remember because at the time, I was working in Orlando because we'd gotten evacuated because of Operation Desert Shield, and we got evacuated, and I was assigned to Orlando because I had family in Florida that could kind of put me up. And I just remember being around this big table, and we had all these people that had a vested interest in this heroin, and I remember going around the table, and almost everybody had like a certain amount of kilos committed to the buyers here, okay? And I'm counting on, we had 20 kilos, and as we're going around the table, we hit number 19, and nobody accounted for that last kilo of heroin. And I just remember saying, like, hey, well, I've got some people down in Florida. I think I can arrange a delivery on this. And I'm not going to say his name, but there was a group supervisor or a RAC, a resident agent in charge of the, I guess, Long Island office, and he gets up and he hits the table and he says, "That's my heroin. We're going to deliver it here," you know? Yeah. And I was just a young agent, and I was like a little bit scared when that happened, you know? But it just showed to me, and it's something that you can probably expound on a little bit more, but it just showed me the competitiveness of DEA because I saw agents, man, they were always striving to make the cases, to get the buyers, to get the dope, to get the money and all this, and put these organizations behind bars. So what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, look, at the end of the day, most of the people that are good in the DEA or any of these law enforcement agencies, they're trying to save lives.
Right.
And we see 20 kilos of heroin. Back in those days, that was a huge amount of heroin.
Right.
And it was coming from, Southwest Asian heroin as opposed to Southeast Asian. That's long before, like, the Colombians got involved and the Mexicans had, like, the black tar and the stuff that wasn't that, pure, and it wasn't that addictive, I guess. But that was a very competitive environment because people wanted to do the job. They wanted to make a difference. So, yeah, it's interesting. Miami and New York always fought over cases and who was getting the glory and stuff like that. So, yeah. That was normal.
What was sort of like, to me, was sort of the nature of a DA agent, the competitive, because everybody wanted to succeed. They wanted to achieve. They wanted to be the folks that made the big cases, that put these people behind bars.
Yeah.
You know,
I mean, that's just the way it is. I mean, it's like competitive sports, right? You're playing to win, right? You have a good time. You try to play fair, but you want to win.
Right.
But so, yeah, I see the analogy all the time with that.
So you're a competitor. Okay. So you played lacrosse. Tell us a little bit about.
Yeah, I was a walk-on, Syracuse University. I was lucky, 4 years up there. And my second year, we won the first national championship for Syracuse. And we were in the finals all 3 years against Johns Hopkins. We lost to. My oldest son went there. He spent 4 years there. My middle guy went there the first year. They were on the team together. And then he transferred to Maryland. When he transferred to Maryland, he happened to be on a very, very good team, and they were in the final game 3 years in a row. He won the championship as a senior.
Wow.
My youngest kid, who grew up here in Loudoun County, went to Riverside, was a pretty good player. He got recruited to Maryland. He played 4 years there. He was in 3 finals, and they won 1 championship. So it's been a good run for a lacrosse family and for a parent. I mean, there's nothing better than seeing your kids play, sports. It doesn't matter if they win or lose. If they're competitive and they're staying focused, and instead of doing other stuff and getting in trouble, right, they could play sports, and it helps them in life as well. So it was a good run.
No, absolutely. So tell us a little bit about, okay, so when President Trump got reelected, got elected again here for the latest term here, 47, and you got contacted. Tell us a little bit about how that transpired and what your thoughts were going back to the DEA and now running the agency entirely, as opposed to when you were just running SID.
So just to go back a second, like when I retired, I felt like this, it sounds kind of corny, but I felt like I had to give back to society. So when I saw the mass amounts of kids that were dying from fentanyl poisoning, so about 8 years ago, before it was popular to the politicians, I was out there, rallying with the families, making collages, trying to get some attention, testifying in Congress. And so a lot of that stuff was just what I wanted to do. I felt like it was my obligation to give back. And we're starting to get people on national news, and we're starting to make a lot of progress. And then all of a sudden, I was lucky. I got called by Tom Holman, who's the current border czar. He was running what we call the Border 911 Foundation. So I got on the team with some high-profile individuals who were also doing God's work, like the former CBP Commissioner, Mark Morgan, the former Border Patrol Chief, Rodney Scott, Sarah Carter, who's a well-known investigative correspondent, Jason Jones, who was running big stuff in Texas, and Victor Avalar, who was almost killed by the Mexican cartel. So we were doing stuff around the country to try to get the American public up to speed on this unbelievable poisoning crisis where the Chinese criminal networks aligned themselves with the Mexican cartels, and then this unbelievable border problem that we had with this wide open border. So obviously, I had, a great team, and I got some exposure. And then when President Trump won the election, they did nominate a former, or actually he's an active sheriff from Hillsborough County down in Florida. Things didn't work out. So they asked me, if I was interested. And then I provided a resume, and then I started the interview process. But as I said, I was actually given the job to be Associate Deputy Attorney General, to be able to Deputy Attorney General, to work with Todd Blanche and his team to synchronize the efforts, not only with the federal agencies, but I used to run the New York Drug Enforcement Task Force, so I know the importance of running with the state and locals. They bring so much to the table. And my father was the chief there for 11 years as well. But anyway, so when I got in there, I was notified initially by the White House that I was getting this this Associate Deputy Attorney General job. Then they moved me to the acting DEA Administrator 2 days later. So I was excited because my father had 30 years. I had the time in. I wanted to check it out and see how I could try to get DEA on the right track. I knew, though, it wasn't a long-term job because obviously I was not picked to be the permanent, right? So actually it was a great experience. I went out and visited the DEA offices. I saw the great work they were doing in the multiple agency environment. I was pushing, the initiatives of the administration because we had like millions of unknown criminals in our country. We were trying to find them and kind of turn them over to ICE, and we were working very cohesively with our multi-agency partners around the country. So it was a good experience.
So, and I got to thank you too for your efforts against fentanyl, because I know, when I first took office here, one of the things that we did, I was able to get the DEA Traveling Museum to come up here and stage out in Leesburg, Virginia. What we wanted to do was to try to get school-age children to come out there to see what lives were lost because of not just fentanyl. At the time, it was more opioid related, and that's really when heroin was starting to make a comeback, and then it was heroin with other additives in it. You know, fentanyl, it's carfentanil, and all these things that were starting to creep in before it became just fentanyl. You know, but we were able to do that. Have forums there, have people that lost loved ones that came out and spoke about it and stuff like that. And I remember, you know, you were helpful there. And I remember when we first did that, we did interviews around the table and actually pushed those out, you know, with folks that were coming in from DEA to kind of help promote what we were doing. And then later on, when fentanyl really started taking off, we were also doing forums to a larger audience here, not just at the DEA museum that was stationed here, but we were actually doing it to a larger audience for people within the county. And you were nice enough to come out and talk about that as well. And, you know, the lives that were lost. And we had people that also, you know, talked about that, about having a son or a daughter or whatever that died from this. But I know, you know, your efforts were just amazing with that. And you started like a wall of folks that had lost their lives. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, so one of the things that really pissed me off, Mike, is that the vast majority of parents that I spoke to, they all said the same thing. I wish the government would have told me about fentanyl.
Right.
So because I'm obsessive compulsive kind of guy, I started figuring out a way, how can I get them to wake the hell up? So I made these collages. I made 25 pages, 90 dead Americans. So the families were giving me the collages. I was making them, and I was then giving them to the families. They were blowing them up. They were making banners. And then I would keep a PDF on my phone. Mm-hmm. And everywhere I went, I'd show people. Right. When I went to Congress, I'd show Jim Jordan. I'd show all the staff over there. People have to wake the hell up because This is not your typical drug crisis. This is what we called in 2014 the perfect storm of death and destruction. The Chinese criminals are working very closely with the Mexican cartels, and the public doesn't have any idea. The kids were being deceived to death. And unfortunately now, it took so long to catch up. Now they're being deceived to death because now when they take pills, they know a little bit about fentanyl, and fentanyl has gone down a little bit, right. But now the carfentanil, the xylazines, the medetomidines, the cyclochlorophines, the nitazines, isonitazine, metanitazine, protonitazine, that's what's in the pills now. And by the way, that stuff's more potent than fentanyl. Wow. So I started this really, behavior because I watched the family's desperate need for help. And I was there to help them any way I could, right? And then the families built an army out there all around the country, and they have all these nonprofits, and they go around, they do their own education. They fight to get into the schools. They do their rallies. We do the annual Lost Voices of Fentanyl rally, downtown DC. We do the Facing Fentanyl rally in New York City in Times Square, right, where they put all the kids' faces in the Times Square Center. Right. Bottom line is that people have to realize that this does happen to everyone's kid. This is not a red or a blue issue. It's a red, right, white, and blue issue. Every American should right. care. But unfortunately, people didn't want to talk about it because it dealt with the border that was wide open, and it dealt with the Chinese criminals. And these are political topics that people didn't want to talk about. So yeah, I enjoyed helping them. I know it sounds corny again, but Jackie Robinson had the saying, a life isn't important except the impact it has on others. And you certainly get that. You've been involved with law enforcement how many years now, right?
Yeah.
And obviously going back to what you said before, which is a compliment to you and your department here, is that you were ahead of it. You had the museum. You had those roundtables. I went to the community event. You invited the entire community. So that stuff's important. People don't do that unless they think it's going to benefit them. You understood it was a life and death situation for your people in this county. So I appreciate that as well.
Well, there were times when we started doing that, because we had Richie Fiano here. He was working here and former chief operations for DEA. And we would actually get DEA to come out here and do some of these events. And when I was first in office, we really didn't have much of a drug problem. I mean, we started seeing the heroin and the opioids starting to pick up. But we would go out sometimes, we'd advertise these. We'd have more people that were presenting that were showing up. And it's only when it starts becoming a problem that people then all of a sudden, it's like, well, wait a minute, what are you doing? It's like, well, we've been doing this since the day I took office. We've been actually out there, doing this kind of stuff. So it actually, picked up speed. So it's been just a collaborative effort between everybody, and including yourself. And I know when you go into DEA headquarters, so you got a wall of all these folks that have lost their lives. Yep. Was what you did an inspiration for?
Well, so what happened was when the collages I made for the Lost Voices in Fentanyl, once they professionalized them, because I was just putting them together as fast as I could.
Right.
I didn't have the names, I didn't have the ages. So the family said, Derek, thanks enough. We're gonna continue now. We're gonna make them better, and they did.
Mm-hmm.
So now they're up to like 60 or 70 of them. So my buddy at the time, who was running the DEA's congressional affairs, and he was advising the administrator, he was actually a very good agent working on this. And I gave him all the collages, and then it was his idea. That was not my idea to build that Faces of Fentanyl. It was John Delaney's idea, and that guy recognized the importance of illuminating the messaging to the public. And right now, it's a beautiful exhibit. It's in DEA headquarters. They have the virtual exhibit. Unfortunately, they don't have enough wall space to fit all the families that have asked to put their kids up on the wall.
Wow.
So they now have to have a virtual exhibit as well. So that's now continuing to grow every day, unfortunately. And then there's other nonprofits that have virtual walls. Drug Epidemic Memorial Wall, I work with them as well. I work with the drug czar now, Sarah Carter. They have a memorial wall in their lobby as well. So we're just trying to maximize the awareness and save lives, because it's going to require not a whole of government approach, a whole of America approach.
Right.
Because the country has been in a chemical war
Right.
for over, as far as I could say in my time, started around 2008. If you want to go back to the methamphetamine days, it goes back even further than that.
Right.
But basically, because the Chinese chemical brokers have been providing the chemicals for all these drugs for so many years, but the deadly chemical attack started with the K2, the spice, the bath salts, then it went into fentanyl, and now it's just all out of control. And that's why you go on the websites now, and I don't recommend doing this, but you go on a Chinese website, you could buy a kilogram of xylazine for $1. Wow. Why would you want to put xylazine in a substance? It causes necrosis, the rotting of human tissue. It actually causes people to rot on the streets. Why would you want to put it? And the DEA did a study in 2024, the DEA's lab system determined that over 30% of all the fentanyl powder that they analyzed had xylazine in it. Think about that. Why would anybody want to put xylazine in it?
Wow.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah, exactly. So it's very
but
bad.
I got to say that your efforts, I mean, what we're seeing now nationally is we're seeing it really coming down. The fentanyl poisoning's really coming down. And it's been a lot of work by a lot of people, but you're certainly on the tip of the spear on a lot of that stuff. And what we're seeing now, I see, is an increase again, going back to the cocaine and going back to the drugs of the past.
Exactly. So like one of the things I've been pushing lately, actually was on a show today, is the methamphetamine is off the charts, like stuff that we've never seen. When we were young agents, a kilo of meth was like a big case, right? A couple pounds here and there. Now it's thousands of pounds. DPS just seized 2,000 pounds. They just hit a record level lab out in California, 2,700 pounds of meth. Atlanta's hitting 1,000 here, 2,000, another 1,000. It's like Houston's hitting 1,000 pounds. We've never seen anything like it. And we're getting ton quantities coming in the tractor trailers that CBP's hitting. So last year, there was 140,000 pounds of meth seized at the border, right? But now, like you said, what we're seeing again is cocaine is back. So, I mean, I don't know if you follow this closely, but in Colombia, we had record levels of production of cocaine. So not only is the cocaine coming into America, again, at a high level, it's going around the world. So they're taking advantage of the world's addiction to cocaine, like in New Zealand, Australia, all over Europe, and they're making more money. And that's why, under this current administration, by declaring the cartels as terrorists, we're doing a much more effective job of going after the supply line. But let me make this clear to the sheriff of Loudoun County. If we don't start teaching these kids on social media, using social media influencers, celebrities, role models, that's where the kids are learning. Why are we not teaching them where they're learning? Yeah. But we haven't done that yet at a very high level. You don't want to have, like I was on Dr. Phil. This is a funny story, and I love Dr. Phil. He illuminated the message. But him and I made a reel together. Now, I thought it was cool. I went home, showed my kids, showed my friends. Look at me and Dr. Phil. What kids in America are following me and Dr. Phil? Okay, that's a mean thing, maybe? No, it's reality. But now if we get some rock star celebrity or influencer getting out there and telling their story, and we're working hard on that. Yeah. Okay, we're working on that. But it's a challenge because they don't understand this is not grandpa's drug crisis. This is a poisoning against our society and destroying our future generation. So we need all hands on deck.
Well, I know you got a good relationship with Sarah Carter, and I'm hoping that that she can actually help facilitate something along those lines. It'd be good to get that information out. I mean, we try to do it at the local level here as best we can, and now we've got certainly a podcast and the outreach. But it takes everybody. You're right. It's not a whole. It's a whole USA approach. It's not a whole of government. It's a whole everybody. You know, we've got to get out there and make sure that we're constantly pushing this out, because we've got to reduce the demand so that these suppliers they can't.
You can't do this like I say all the time. You have to have the same sense of urgency on the demand issues as you have the supply. I'm very confident we're on the right track for the supply line. Okay, we're blowing up boats. We're doing what we have to do to go after these terrorists. Okay. But the demand side is not really being dealt with. And by the way, here's another one, okay? And you know this because we talked about it earlier. Mental illness is on the incline. And after COVID, whether it's the younger generation, the older generation, people losing jobs or whatever it may be, family situations, they're turning to pills for help. They're turning to the illicit drug supply for help. They don't want to talk about it. They're embarrassed. And unfortunately, the illicit drug supply is tainted. So people are dying, and they're going to continue to die. Parents, they have to stop being in denial. You know what bothers me, Mike? The school boards and the school superintendents, they won't even let us go into the schools to talk to the kids. We're trying to save lives.
Right.
Like, I don't take a fee. If I go to speak about this, I don't take a fee. I do it to help save lives.
Sure.
But you can't imagine. I mean, you can imagine, certainly.
Yeah.
I don't mean that literally. But people can't imagine that you can't penetrate some of these bureaucracies because they know better. We'll handle the drug situation.
Well, we certainly had some disagreements here with our school system here, but we keep marching forward, and we just keep trying to correct it and doing the best that we can do with everything that we got, you know. So, hey, before we wrap this up, I just want to go back to the first story that we talked about here, and that was when you and I first met and you came out to Pakistan. And I remember how crazy it was, because all the Pakistani law enforcement knew what we were carrying on that, on that plane. And then we took an Air France flight. We flew to Paris, and then from Paris to New York. And I just remember you had one, big duffel bag full of cocaine, and I had the other. So you had 10 kilos. That's a lot of weight there. I had 10 kilos in the other, and we're putting this stuff up in the overhead bins, and I'm thinking to myself, we're not armed because you couldn't fly
Afraid
armed.
to sleep.
Man, we were lucky.
Yeah,
we
you
didn't
fall
get
asleep and the bag's gone.
Yeah, we're lucky we didn't get attacked along the way, you know. So it was a pretty crazy time. It was a great way to meet you, and it was a great introduction for you. But I tell you what, when we got there to New York, and I just remember being with you, and we're making those calls to the informants, and we're working around the clock trying to make sure we get these buyers lined up.
So let me just bring back a little memory here. So we took your informant, we put him in the Marriott Hotel on Long Island, where I grew up, and we had him in there. He didn't eat American food, so we had to go out to the Pakistani restaurant or Afghani restaurant, whatever it may be, just to make sure he ate properly, right? But then he was all night on the phone, and he was calling to this guy, Salih John. All right, what do you want me to do? He said, wait there. Someone's going to call you. This was going on for weeks and weeks. It was crazy, but it was fun.
Yeah. They never go the way you want it. They're never on your timetable, these drug dealers, that's for sure. But hey, Derek, I want to thank you. I want to thank you for taking the time to come out here and getting to see our new podcast studio and being our very first interview here on the Stepping Out series of what we're doing here at the Loudoun County Sheriff's Office.
Thank you.
You're doing a great job out there. Keep it up. I see you on TV all the time, and you're really a voice of sanity here, and we really got to get your message out. And let's keep on pushing.
Thank you, Sheriff. It was awesome to talk to you, and keep up the good work.
Okay, thank you, Derek. Appreciate it.
Take it easy.
All right, thanks.